It's Keystone Youth Live with Will Mitchell and Chris Cox.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to week 2 of Keystone Youth Live. I'm your host, Will Mitchell.
And I'm Chris Cox. Today's fun fact: blue whales are called blue whales because they are blue and whales. Over to you, Will.
That is so interesting. Never say.
Google it. Guarantee you that's true.
Never say you didn't learn anything on this show. Well, on tonight's episode, here's what we've got coming up. First, you're going to learn an interesting fact. We got that out of the way. Next, we're going to give you a chance. We're going to draw a name for our lucky winner from last week's competition. And then we are going to have some time on the couch. So it's going to be amazing. We got a very special guest with us that we will reveal to you in just a little bit. We cannot wait for that. But you know what?
It's Gandhi. We got Gandhi, guys.
We did.
We did. We dug him up. He's here now.
We're amazing.
Kind of smells a little.
Hey, do you know what day it is?
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Because it's time for youth.
It's time for youth. And do you know what? You guys had a chance. We told you last Wednesday night that this Wednesday would be the chance for you to get your name drawn to win a $20 digital germ-free gift card.
Yes, no viruses on that cash money.
The way you do it, or the way we told you do it, is you sign up for our text service. Do we have the instructions for text service? Here we go. You sign up for text updates, and we said, hey, you sign up for these text updates. We are going to draw a name. And so what we did, we got a ton of people signed up, Chris.
How many?
I actually don't have. I don't know.
At least 2,000 pounds. A ton of people.
I'm not good at counting.
That's maybe 20 people would be a ton. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
We'll take it.
I don't know, like 55-ish. I made that number up, but I think it's close. It's April Fool's Day. We can actually say whatever we want.
Yeah, there are no laws.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing.
It's basically the purge.
Here's what I've done. I've not chopped up. That sounds bad.
Yikes.
Let me rephrase that. I have put the names of all of our people in this basket.
Wow.
And one lucky winner is going to get a gift card emailed to them. Chris,
Amazing.
would you like to do the honors of drawing for us?
I would love to do the honors.
All right, hold on. Let me put my name at the top.
Okay. Nope. Can't do that.
Now if my kid wins, I'm going to feel really bad.
Right, a little nepotism.
All right, I'm kidding. Here, we got to shake them up really good.
There you go.
I'm going to hold it up really high because for some reason that matters.
Yeah, I guess.
Are we even out of the shot? I think.
I don't know.
All right, there we go.
All right.
Our lucky winner is
Eliana.
Wait. Oh, you want to tell him? You don't want to tell him who it is yet, do you?
I was already started, so it's Eliana Minter.
Eliana Minter.
Hey,
how lucky are you?
Not your kid, but your boss's kid.
Hey,
Nothing suspicious with that.
It's close enough. So here's what you need to do to claim your prize. We want you to send a text into us. Send a text into us, letting us know what are you going to do, and just a picture celebrating your winnings.
Yes.
So it's just a picture celebrating how excited you are that you won the very first ever prize on Keystone Youth Live.
Woo!
We're just going to put that down there.
Come on down.
Yeah. So
you get a digital gift card.
I am so excited for that. And you know what, Chris? I have a gift for you, too.
Yeah? Friendship?
I think so.
Oh, great. I was actually worried you were just about to spit that in my face because the timing of that. I'm like, I would deserve it, though, to be fair.
Chris, I'm going to give you a chance to win my friendship.
That's all I've ever wanted in life.
Yeah. So we all know how it works in school.
Winning friendship?
Pop quizzes.
Oh, pop quizzes.
Pop quizzes.
Yeah.
So we're going to have a pop quiz. And honestly, if you're watching right now on YouTube Live and you want to play along in the comments, we would love that. So you can play along in the comments today. We're going to play April Fool or April Fail. April Fool or April Fail. And here's how the game is going to work. I'm going to read you.
Me.
Yeah, you. Yeah, I'm going to read you.
Chris.
A story.
Okay.
It is a true life April Fool's story.
Oh.
And you have to decide, did they fool them or did they fail? So did they fool or did they fail?
So everything that happens in the story is real.
These are real pranks and real things that people have done.
But it's whether or not it was successful for the person they were trying to fool.
Yeah. So was it a good thing or a bad thing? Right? Like,
oh man.
Like did they live to regret this decision?
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So you ready?
Yeah. Let's do it.
All right. So first off, just a fun fact.
Yeah.
Do
lot
you
of
know,
fun facts tonight.
Yeah, so many fun facts. Do you know the original history of April Fool's Day?
It was probably something in medieval Europe, and they were distracting themselves from the plague.
You're so close.
Yeah?
No, actually, not really.
Byzantine Europe.
You're not really. Actually, nobody really knows. So there's like no wrong answer. So you're right. Congratulations. That's a point for you.
2 stars for Chris.
Yeah, actually, we know April Fool's been around since at least the 1500s.
Okay.
The theory is that they used to be on a different kind of calendar.
Sure.
And when they moved like the calendars, April 1st used to be New Year's. And now January 1st is New Year's. And so what happened was they went from April 1st was New Year's to January 1st. And so the people who still thought April 1st was New Year's were the fools.
Idiots.
And they were the April Fools.
Yeah.
Just backwoods
Same
idiots.
year, stupid people.
You guys have no idea how to read the calendar. So
They probably didn't know how to read, to be honest.
Yeah, we don't know. Actually, that could be completely made up, but the internet told me it was true.
We'll never know.
So, I don't know.
The internet would never lie, especially not today, of all days.
All right, you ready to separate the fools from the fails, people? All right,
do
so
it.
if you're playing along at home, I want you to put in the comments, fool or fail. So, fooled or failed.
Question
All right?
1, fool or fail?
Question 1. The earliest April Fool's Day hoax on record was in 1698. People in London were told to go see the annual ceremony of the washing of the lions. Do you think, A, they fooled them and it was a fantastic success, or B, people got mauled by lions and it was a massive fail?
I kind of want to go with fail. I'm going to go with fail. Just right out the gate, let's go with fail.
That's my buzzer. I don't have a buzzer. I need a buzzer.
Yeah.
It actually worked so well. There were no actual lions, but the prank worked so well that year after year, they can keep bringing in out-of-towners, and they actually sold them tickets to the bathing of the lions. And so the people who came up with this thing made like a fortune.
Then why do they call it Piccadilly Circus if there were no lions?
I had nothing.
I got my eye on you, old 400-year-old Britain long time ago. I'm coming for you.
Coming for you.
Pulled the wool over my eyes for the last
Got
time.
me once. All right, so far, keep track of your own score at home. Chris has 0. All right,
Goose
number
egg.
2. In 1996, Taco Bell ran a newspaper ad announcing that they had purchased the Liberty Bell. The Liberty Bell was now the Taco Bell. The ad was a risky thing to do. Do you think, A, it fooled everyone and they thought it was just great fun? Or B, it was such a massive failure that people complained and got lawsuits?
I'm going to go with everybody was fooled and it was a fun time because Taco Bell is great. And the sponsors of our show tonight, Taco Bell.
The chalupa.
The chalupa.
I miss the Taco Bell dog. Do you
I
remember the
do.
Taco Bell dog? Our viewers
Not
probably don't
very
remember
racially sensitive, but
No, but he was
Cute
funny.
dog.
He was cute.
Cute dog.
It was indeed. You are correct. It was a massive success. It drove tons of ad revenue, and it's actually the reason that businesses started promoting April Fools and like fake products and
Really?
all of this stuff. It was all stemming back to 1996 with Taco Bell.
So that's 1 point, Chris. What's that? Scoreboard. Hello.
How you doing at home? I hope you guys are doing well. Here we go. I hope
you're not. I hope I'm beating the socks
Okay.
off of you.
All right, here we go. This one's a real cliffhanger. You
Okay.
ready? In 2001, a DJ. We already know DJs aren't like maybe.
Well respected.
Yeah, you're a DJ, aren't you, Chris?
I'm a wedding DJ.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
On the side. That's fine.
A DJ decided to prank his listeners by broadcasting that a ship that looked suspiciously like the Titanic could be seen from the cliffs in East Sussex.
Ooh, back to you, UK. Okay.
So we're back there again. I don't know why they have all the best April Fool's stories.
I don't know.
So, do
Probably
you
because
think...
they call it like St. Blimmindy's Day or something weird. 'Cause
So
that's
do
what
you
British
think,
people
A,
do.
we got to keep this thing moving. Like, we're on
Yeah.
a very tight
I'm with
schedule.
you.
A, it was a massive success. He became Insta-famous, okay? Or B, it caused massive chaos and ruin. So fail or fool?
I am going to go with fail this time.
You're going to go with fail?
Yeah.
What do you guys think at home? Get your answers locked in. Drop them in the comments. All right. You ready?
Yeah.
It was an absolute epic April fail.
Yeah.
And the reason is, unfortunately, hundreds of listeners actually believed this guy.
Oh, no.
They rushed to the cliff, and they actually did massive damage to this cliff. They cracked it because they had so much weight of the foot traffic.
Yeah.
And then a few days later, the whole cliff just fell into the sea.
Yikes.
So this guy literally ruined the cliffs in Sussex. Wow. That's why nobody talks about them. They always talk about the Dover ones.
Yeah, that's because that's all that's left. That's all that's left Dover.
Oh.
Well, that's it for us tonight. See you later.
All right. One more.
Let's do this.
How many do you have right? 3?
I have 2 right.
2 right?
Because
Okay.
we've done 3.
I was trying to give you an extra point, but you're welcome.
I mean, I'll take it.
All right, here we go. April 1st, 1957.
Yes.
The British Broadcasting Corporation. Again, back to our friends across the pond here.
Lovable limeys.
They told viewers they had been an exceptionally heavy spaghetti crop that year in Switzerland, due in part to the virtual disappearance of the spaghetti weevil. Do you think, A, everyone had a great laugh and it was a great April Fool, or B, was it a massive April fail that caused all kinds of turmoil?
I am going to go with it was a fool.
It was actually a massive fail.
Really?
Because when the BBC showed footage of spaghetti harvesters diligently picking up noodles from their trees, viewers were angry and called to ask why they couldn't find a spaghetti bush. This is 100% true.
Spaghetti.
According to Google.
Wow.
So go look it up. It's great. All right. Last one.
Okay.
Last one. You ready? Here we
Yep.
go.
So I'm
You guys
2
ready at
and
home?
2.
2 and 2.
2 and
How are you
2.
guys doing at home? Lock in your
Great.
answers. Keep talking to us in the
Cool.
comments. We love that. All right, here we go. April Fools, 2003. So not that distant history.
Okay.
Our listeners were alive, some of them anyway. So here we go. A clothing store employee in Columbus, Ohio, decided to call her boss and tell him that someone was robbing the store at gunpoint. Do you think, A, it was a great April Fool, the guy loved it, and she was promoted, or B, it was a massive April fail that ended not well?
I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to say it was a fail.
You think it was a fail?
Yeah, I think it was a fail, and she went to jail.
What do you guys think? Ooh, the jail fail.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that.
Jail fail.
Jail fail. All right, here's how it ended. Before she even had time to call him back and confess to the prank, the boss had called the police. 4 patrol cars rolled up to the store, and the employee was arrested. Arrested? That's not even, arrested. I don't even know why
She
I said
wasn't
that.
well rested because she was going to jail.
Arrested for inducing panic.
Wow.
So that was the crime that she was arrested for.
Yeah.
So overall, you came out with a winning record, right? 3 and 2.
3 and 2.
3 and 2. That's a winning record. We'll take
60%.
that. Fans of any Iowa football team are always okay with that.
Yes.
So we're
D's
good.
get degrees.
Hey, we are happy with that. I can't wait to see how you guys did at home. If you beat Chris, make sure you give us a shout out in the comments there. But you know what time it is?
What time is it?
I think it's time for the part on the couch.
Yeah.
Let's go.
This is the part where they go to the couch. They'll leave the desk and go sit down. This is the part where they go to the couch. Let's watch them sit down.
All right, well, welcome to the part on the couch. Again, I'm your host, Will, and my special guest tonight is my good friend Taylor Aukus. Taylor has been leading a connection group here at Keystone Youth for, I think, about 3 years now? Something like that?
Yeah, about as long as you've been here.
Yeah, about as long as I've been around. So Taylor is absolutely an expert at connection group leading. He's an expert at beard growing and at lacrosse, if I remember correctly. And Taylor, we've been talking a lot about just going into the unknown, like when life circumstances really force us to step back and say, hey, I don't actually know and understand what God's doing here in my life. I don't know how this story is going to end, but I'm gonna walk through it with faith. And so, Taylor, if you don't know Taylor personally, Taylor and his wife Samantha have a phenomenal story of faith and of just walking into the unknown. And Taylor, I would love to have you tell us that story a little bit, just starting with about probably this time last year.
Yeah, actually pretty close to this time last year. was July 2nd. Samantha was 27 weeks pregnant with our son and was having some complications with it. Went into the doctor.
First kid?
Yeah, first kid.
First kid.
Way to start it well out of the gate.
Yeah.
Ended up finding out that our son had a mass on his right lung, which had caused multiple complications, including high drops. So just an excessive amount of liquid buildup in his entire body. The freaky thing with that was all the doctors we were talking to in Des Moines, every single one of them said, like, we're not equipped to be able to handle this situation. We had actually booked a flight to go out to Denver to a specialist hospital out there. We were told we were going to get checked out there. That was going to be where our son would be delivered.
Oh, wow. So they didn't want to deliver in Des Moines?
No, they said they were absolutely not equipped to handle a situation as complex as his.
That's crazy.
And that was really a point for me where, like, as you had brought up, the first time ever going to be a parent, first pregnancy, and it was just nowhere near what we expected to be going through. Just a complete mix of emotions from panic, fear, desperation, like wanting to be able to do something to fix the situation, but not being able to. I don't have my doctorate, so like there was nothing physically that I could do to rectify the situation. And 2 days later, it had been over 24 hours since Samantha had felt any kicks. So we decided we were already on edge and a little paranoid. So we went in, just make sure we could get a heartbeat, make sure everything was still fine. Because it was that Sunday that we were flying out to Denver. And I remember being in the triage room, hearing his heartbeat come up on the screen and just feeling relief. And then next thing we know, there is just a small army of doctors and nurses in the room.
Oh, my goodness.
Having us sign forms, talking about delivering him right then and there. And
When were you guys due? When were you supposed to have the baby?
his due date was September 29th,
And this was when?
July 4th.
Oh, my goodness.
So it was 13 weeks ahead of schedule.
Wow.
And in that triage room, like I had a full on panic attack. Like it was an out of body experience. My knees would not stop shaking. Nurses forced me to eat some crackers because I thought I was going to pass out. Like I did not look good. And the hardest part for us was Samantha. I remember her asking the nurse, I thought you said you weren't equipped to handle a kid like our son.
Yeah.
And the nurse looked at her and said, well, we're not. But his best chance of surviving is if he comes out now.
So essentially, like, we have no idea what we're doing. We shouldn't be doing this, but we don't have a choice.
Yep. And
It's not exactly confidence boosting.
And it didn't help either that right after that was when the doctor came in and told us that with the stacking of the two issues that our son had, there was like a 1 to 2% chance that he would survive. And if he did, like he was guaranteed to have brain bleeds and so would have mental damage for his entire life. And after that, remember getting rushed to the delivery room. I remember sitting down, grabbing my wife's hand, kissing her and saying, God's in control. You got this. Loud splash. Nurse saying, Dad, you want to see your son? And it was pretty close to 10 minutes before I saw him move at all. And that was the point when the doctor working in the delivery room finally got him to start breathing. And as soon as I saw him move for the first time, it was a wave of peace just kind of came over me. And it was like God put his hand on my shoulder and said, Taylor, watch this miracle. And that was the point for me where, like, I finally started to have hope.
So how big? So we had some pictures that we're showing people. How big was Odin when he was born?
So in the delivery room, because of all the excess fluid buildup, they actually removed 14 syringes full of fluid from his abdomen. And after that, he weighed 4 pounds, 1.2 ounces.
So 4 pounds, and how much of that was still just fluid and like stuff that shouldn't have even been there?
Probably close to 2 pounds of that.
So really, I mean, his actual like body, he's a 2 pound baby, really.
Yeah.
That's so crazy. So, I mean, talk to us about like the days and the weeks that followed. I mean, first of all, we want to know the rest of the story. Secondly, man, like, what does it look like to pray in a season like that? Like, what do your prayers even look like? That, I don't know.
Yeah. So the next 3 weeks were really just a dark time for both Samantha and I. There was, including that time in the triage room, there was 5 times total that we had doctors sit us down and say, your son's not going to make it through the night. And 3 of those times, the doctors actually asked me to sign a consent to pull the plug. So it was not a fun time for us. Kind of where our prayers circulated around. I was praying for a lot of comfort. And what I mean by that is I did a Bible study, and like the actual Greek word for comfort means together strength. And all my prayers, which were just completely and utterly desperate prayers of absolute begging, were just, God, give me strength to be strength for my wife, to be strength for the rest of my family, and just praying constantly, like, God, do what the doctors say can't happen.
Yeah. So tell us the rest of the story. Like, we want to know, what did God do?
So at about the 19 to 20 day mark, we finally got a doctor on rotation who said, you know what, we're just going to let it ride. And I'll be honest with you, like, I've been reading the reports, and like, your son hasn't told us that he's throwing in the towel yet. So we're just gonna kind of see how this goes. And at about the 21 day mark, he had made just a bunch of progress out of nowhere and was showing better vital signs. And it seemed like it happened so fast, but the doctor told us there was actually some time in between it. But he ended up getting transferred to the University of Iowa Children's Hospital. And within 3 days of being there, had the surgery that removed the mass from his lungs. And about 3-4 days after the mass had been removed, his high drops resolved. And then he just got to a point where they worked on weaning him off the ventilator, getting him off oxygen, to the point where we were able to transfer back to Blank so I could go back to work and we could be closer to our church family and everything like that. Grand total, he spent 107 days in the NICU.
That's crazy. And and he's home?
Yep.
When did he come home?
It was October 28th.
October 28th. So July 4th he was born. Independence Day, baby. Go America.
Yep.
And then the end of October, he came home. And I think we have some updated pictures. Yeah, there we go. We got some updated pictures of him. How's Odin doing now?
Now, if you see from the picture that's up right now, he is, he's got my attitude. But medical stuff aside, Samantha and I are just absolutely floored at like how easy going of a baby he is. Like it doesn't take much to get him to smile, and like he's to the point where he's starting to babble, learning how to roll over, driving, all the important things babies do.
High expectations in the Aka's household, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, his grandpa's already talking about what type of tractor he's going to drive first.
That's awesome. So tell me just in the last like 2 minutes or the couple minutes that we have here, like just a little bit about like, man, what did you learn through all of this? I mean, how did this whole experience shape and change maybe the way that you view faith and the way that you view God? I mean, did it stretch or expand your view of God and of your faith?
Oh, it expanded it so much. For me, like you read the Bible and you hear of all these miracles that Jesus did, all these miracles that God did, and it's very easy to be like, well, that's Old Testament. New Testament, God doesn't do that anymore. And to be able to be on the front lines and witness something where we had multiple doctors actually use the word miracle in describing Odin. Like I got a front row ticket to a current miracle, and that completely expanded my view of God. And it taught me a lot too from like a prayer life standpoint of like there is so much power in prayer. And like the support we had from our Keystone family, the amount of people that were praying for him. He had a Facebook prayer page. The amount of people who would comment on that and say, hey, we're praying, like it humbled me because these people were still going strong, praying 2 months into it.
Wow, that's awesome. Man, I think one of the reasons that we want to tell these stories like Taylor's and others is that we're talking about going into the unknown, and man, you guys went into that in a way that and I get to kind of be just along for the ride with and just kind of see that from a little bit of a distance and a safe social distance, right? And just watching you guys interact through that and just your faith was just such a testimony and encouragement to me. And I think our goal is to show you that this is the same God who worked in the Old Testament, who worked in the Bible. You're going to hear a story in just a minute. Is the same God that is still at work today. And so I don't know, what it is that the people that are watching, the students that are watching, are going through and experiencing. But just to hear, man, like God is a miracle working God, and He's not done yet. And Taylor, I'm just gonna pray for you and for Odin and for Samantha, and then we are gonna transfer it over to Chris, who's gonna be teaching tonight. Father, thank you so much for Odin. God, thank you for the miracle of Odin. Thank you for Taylor and Samantha's faith, and just to come out on the other side with the story that you are the same God who worked Old Testament miracles, are the same God who's going to come through for your people today. And so, God, I don't know what the students that are watching are experiencing or walking through, but God, I know that no matter how dark or how confusing the present or the future looks, Taylor and Odin and Samantha's story reminds us that you are with us every step of the way. God, be with Chris as he teaches. In Jesus' name, amen.
Over to me. Good times. Good time.
All right, Chris, what do you got for us tonight?
Well, first off, again, big props to Taylor for coming and sharing his story. I've known Taylor for 3-ish years now. It's good job, babe. Good job. We have that kind of relationship. We have that kind of friendship.
You can't do that here.
I didn't actually even see that you were drinking water at the time. We almost ruined an iPad. Yes. So within the spirit of Into the Unknown, the whole idea of like navigating what we can't control, what we can't determine, all these things that we have no real way of manipulating or understanding. Tonight we're going to be in the book of Ruth, which through prepping for this has actually become, I think, maybe one of my favorite books of the Bible. Ruth, for those of you who don't know, a little historical background and a little Bible knowledge for you. Ruth is in the Old Testament. It's right after Judges. So it goes Joshua, Judges, Ruth. So if you remember Joshua, the Sunday series that we were just in, up until relatively recently, this is pretty timely for that. So I think we're just going to do a quick kind of flyover of the story, but there's some really great themes that are present in this that I think are timely for the current season we're in, but even just ways to reorient your life and ways to see Christ's goodness in the Old Testament, which are always really fun little nuggets that God has just woven into the story of the Bible, is like all these aspects that are
not
fully, not chicken nuggets. Well, they could have chicken. So yeah, shrimp nuggets, no.
Right.
Chicken nuggets, yes. So without much further ado, shrimp nuggets, it's a thing, shrimp tempura. So it's the time of the Judges is when Ruth is set. It is set firmly in the Judges. So we don't quite have a king yet for the nation of Israel. David hasn't happened, but we're post the Israelites coming and taking over the land. So the land, the inheritance of the Israelites, it's there. They're living there. Specifically, we're going to be focusing on a family in Bethlehem. So we're here in the Promised Land. We're here in the land of Israel. They've received what is their inheritance. This is what God has promised to their forefathers, to the patriarchs. They're there. They're living in it. Unfortunately, and you see this all through the book of Judges, sometimes the Israelites forget all that and they act badly. They fall into cycles of idolatry and idol worship, pagan thoughts, and just generally not following this God who, this is like the same generation from Joshua, drove out Canaanites and all this before them. So we see this in this this family specifically. It's the family of Elimelech.
It's kind of fun to say.
That is our big fancy word of tonight.
That's our word for tonight. All right, we got to keep moving.
Word of the night, Elimelech. So Elimelech has a wife, Naomi, and there's a famine going on in Israel. They're in Bethlehem, which you obviously know, Bethlehem from Jesus, where Jesus was born, also known as the city of David. So they're in Bethlehem. They have to leave because of this famine. And a lot of times we see this, especially in Judges, God would allow famines to happen just as a way to shake up the population, to make the Israelites not depend on themselves, to remind them of where this goodness and all this inheritance had come from. So there's a famine going on because Israel's not being great. So Elimelech and Naomi, they leave. They leave with their 2 sons and they head to Moab, which is east of the Jordan River. If you remember the Jordan River in Joshua, that's where they have to cross to get to the Promised Land. So the Jordan River kind of at that point of reference. So they're heading east. They're going out into these people groups that God has specifically said, hey, don't be hanging out with these people. So right away we can see that we're in trouble because they have been in a land of God's providence, and because they were not obeying God and their hearts were turned from him, God was allowing them to be punished as a way to refine them. But they didn't look at that punishment as a good thing to remind, oh yeah, that's right, God's in charge, he's the one that's got it. They said, oh, let's just do our own thing now and let's go to these other lands east of the Jordan and kind of take things into our own control. So it really is continuing that theme. So they get to Moab and they settle there. This isn't just like a quick little staycation. They're waiting for things to blow over. They settle there. So they're putting down roots. Elimelech, the father, ends up dying soon after that. That's not super great. Soon after that, the 2 remaining sons end up marrying Moabite women, which again is a big no-no for the people of Israel. So Israelites were not supposed to be taking foreign wives.
So like the girls married, so the guys, they married those girls that the mom and dad did not approve of.
Well, actually, it seems like mom did approve of these.
Didn't have high standards.
Yeah, exactly. Because at this point, she has no husband, so she's probably thinking, all right, we got to make sure this family is surviving and all this. So she, as far as we can tell, at least approves or doesn't discourage them from taking Moabite wives. So then that's not great. Moabite women especially are known for essentially seducing and stealing away Israelite men into idolatry, into not worshiping God. So that seems to be the case, especially here. 10 years goes by, and both of those sons die. So now Naomi is left with her 2 daughters-in-law. She doesn't have her husband, and she doesn't have her 2 sons that she came here with while they were expecting to be escaping famine and all this stuff.
So far, this is a really depressing story, Chris. So famine, dad dies,
Yep.
2 boys die.
Yep, her 2 sons die.
And now there's this lady and her 2 daughter-in-laws. And that's, so far, this is not super encouraging.
Yeah, so life is not probably going the way that they had expected it to go. So they're actually, Naomi is worse off than she was before. And she decides, okay, I'm going to pack up. I'm going to head back to Israel. I'm going to head back to Bethlehem. It's even a little foreshadowing of the prodigal son in that way. This whole idea of I'm going to leave from what the father has provided and from being under his authority, and I'm going to make my own way. And that ends up not working, and you end up being bankrupt, both spiritually, physically, just all these ways that you think that you're going to be able to master your own fate, and you can't. So now she's entirely out of luck. She has to go back home. And so she says to her 2 daughters-in-law, Ruth and Orpah, she says, go back to the house of your fathers, go back to the people that can provide for you, and go back to your gods, essentially. You don't have to go to Israel with me. You've done more than enough. Essentially, what can I provide for you? I can't give you any sons. I'm too old to remarry, even if I had sons like this exact moment. Are you going to wait around to be able to marry them? So she's kind of trying to cut ties. One is maybe a nice way of doing it, saying, I can't do anything for you, so it's better off where you came from. It might also be a little bit of shame of she doesn't want to have her 2 sons' widows around her to remind her of what has transpired or really not transpired for her, which is they thought all this great stuff was going to happen. So Orpah, one of her daughters-in-law, there's a little back and forth, and she eventually does leave and heads back home. Ruth, on the other hand, is different. So Ruth, instead of leaving Naomi, decides that she is going to make a vow that is on par with like a marriage covenant, something that is so far above and beyond the expectation of a daughter-in-law to her mother-in-law. So she makes this vow that she's going to go where Naomi goes. She's going to live where she lives. She is going to worship the God that Naomi worships, because she's still a pagan. She's still a Moabite. She still is not a God follower, as we can tell from this. So at this point, she is just taking her entire life and saying, it is going to be for you, Naomi. So she's giving up even her own control of her own destiny, because she's probably young. She could remarry all this. And out of love and kindness, she's going with Naomi into a foreign land to Ruth, from Ruth's perspective.
Wow.
Yep. So now they're setting off. Ruth has decided to essentially be Naomi's servant in all of these ways, and they head back off to Israel. So after they go to Israel, they end up in Naomi's old town, Bethlehem, and she ends up being greeted by all these neighbors, and they ask, hey, is this Naomi? Because, again, they haven't seen her in at least 10 years.
She's changed a little.
She's changed a little. I mean, everything that's happened to them between famine and all this, I'm sure she physically even looks
Oh my goodness.
more than 10 years older than all this. So there's a big physical effect with that. So we actually have this verse that shows exactly what Naomi says after all of her old neighbors and friends are coming up to her and being like, hey, is this Naomi? Naomi, is that you? And so in chapter 1, verse 20, here's what we hear from Naomi. So she says, don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara, she answered, for the Almighty has made me very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why do you call me Naomi? Since the Lord has opposed me and the Almighty has afflicted me. Woof.
So like, yeah, that's heavy.
Yeah. So Naomi actually means pleasant is the original meaning of that name.
So don't call me
She's
that
gone
anymore.
from pleasant to bitter. So if your name was Joy and then you changed your name legally to Sadness and had everybody call you Sadness or Crying
Yeah.
or something like that. So this is just an example of how far she has
Wow.
gone and how much she has lost. So yeah, that's the first thing she says to these, neighbors she hasn't seen in a while. Not like, hey guys, what's up? Or, oh, he's taller now. But hey, I'm just a big old bag of bitterness because she has gone through so much in all these trials and all this hurt. She sees this as God's judgment and his hand being against her, like a punishment just being so heavy on her. So then she decides to literally be called bitter.
Whoa.
Yep. So now we're back in Israel. This is when things kind of start to take off and for the better. So in Israel, they have no direct family. Remember, Elimelech is dead. She has no sons. They might have like some relatives here and there. We don't hear much about her being like welcomed into Elimelech's family if he had brothers or anything like that. So it's time to figure out how to eat and survive now because they are two women in the Near East in biblical times. They really can't have land. They don't have any real trade or anything like that. So they have to figure out how to survive. They basically just have the clothes off of their back that they brought with from Moab. So again, we see this example of Ruth initiating a servant attitude for Naomi. So she initiates just providing for them. She asks Naomi, hey, is it all right? We need to eat. Is it cool if I work out in these fields? And there's a really cool custom and law and tradition in Israel where widows, foreigners, and the poor essentially could go out into these fields during harvest. They were allowed to pick up anything that had been dropped and left behind. And in fact, there was actually commandments to leave stuff behind for them at the edges of fields. And this was a way to provide socially for those who didn't have much. So people who couldn't own land, because remember, this land is an inheritance that's been given to the Israelites. So it's already essentially divvied up. If you want to learn more about that, go back to the book of Numbers. You'll fall asleep, then go back to the book of Numbers, crack a Red Bull, go back to the book of Numbers. You can
That's where every Bible reading plan
it is
just gets hung up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's good though because you get to see all the ways that these people are being so explicitly provided for. So essentially this is kind of their welfare. This is all that they can do in the situation. So Ruth goes out to a field. And I don't know if you guys have ever had to pick grain. It's not just like, grain, here's like a pound of it. It's like tiny little pieces that don't weigh a lot, and you have to get a lot of it to actually be able to eat. So it's hard work. You're bending over. It's backbreaking labor in a lot of different ways. It's not easy. It's not just opening up an Etsy. They didn't have that yet. So Ruth decides to go and do this now to take on all the responsibility of provider.
Nothing. I was going to say it was like grain fund me, but
Yeah, sounds great.
it's like
You
a
guys want to go to the
GrainFundMe
wheat
account.
field?
Yeah.
Man, not Wheatsfield, though, up in Ames. That's a good place, though. So while she's out in this field, she meets our next character, Boaz. She is actually in Boaz's field. So Boaz notices Ruth while he's meeting with his workers, and he asks, hey, who is this person? I haven't met him before. A lot of times in these fields, you would find probably the same people because it a lot of times might end up being family, et cetera, who would be in the field of another family member, something like that. So this is his portion of field, and she's working in it, and he kind of wants to know what's up with this, right? So he finds out that she's from Moab, that she's from a foreign country, and that she came back with Naomi. He's really impressed by that. He's impressed that she would decide to essentially forsake her own fortune and anything that she could be doing on her own. And he thinks that's pretty cool. He recognizes how honorable and how generous and above and beyond kind of just what custom and duty would dictate. So he says to his workers, hey, let her work, let her glean from behind you, and actually drop more stuff so it's easy for her to pick it up. Make sure that nobody harasses her. She's a very vulnerable person. She's a foreigner, and she's also a single woman in this environment. So he is looking out for both her basic needs of making sure that she has enough to eat, but then also thinking ahead and finding extra ways to shelter and protect, and to use his position for that. So that's a characteristic that we actually see in Boaz a lot. It's really great. He goes so far up and beyond the minimum of like what is expected and what is supposed to happen. And he raises the bar. And we see that in Ruth too. So already we're seeing there's kind of some resonant character between the two of them.
That's awesome.
So at the end of the day, she's been working hard. And Boaz sees that, and he invites Ruth actually to eat with him and some of the other workers. And so we see this in chapter 2. There's this exchange. In chapter 2, verse 14, at mealtime, Boaz told her, come over here and have some bread and dip it in the vinegar sauce. So she sat beside the harvesters, and he offered her roasted grain. She ate and was satisfied and had some left over. I know what you're thinking. Oh, bread and vinegar, awesome.
Sounds delicious.
Hey, Mom, I know what I want for lunch tomorrow. Bread and vinegar, extra malty.
Fun fact, when my kids used to say naughty things or they used naughty words, we would put vinegar in their mouths.
Yeah, my dad would put
not like large quantities.
Not like a liter or anything.
Like make them drink it, but
no, yeah,
so
just a little
so
bit.
It doesn't sound pleasant.
It's not always the most, but it's something that, salt and vinegar chips are a thing. So it's something above and beyond just plain white bread or plain bread or anything like that. Yeah. So what we see in this moment is Boaz, again, he's a man who doesn't just give the bare minimum, but he's inviting her to be with him, which is, he's the owner of this field. He's with the people who are working. So that's kind of a little bit of a status bump for her. And he's not just giving her bread. He's not just giving her grain and all this. He's giving her things to dip it in. So not only does Boaz give nourishment, he also gives relishment. Relishment isn't a word. However, I just wanted that to stick in your brains a little more. Not only does he nourish, give her what she needs, but he also gives her something to relish, which is above and beyond. So again, that goes back to Boaz's character that we see in that. In his moments of plenty, he's helping someone who is in moments of little. So she even has food left over, it says, right? It says that she has some left over. So that means she can take that back home to Naomi. She can take that, maybe eat it on her way, etc. But again, he's given her more than just for that meal. So at the end of that, Ruth goes back. And long story short, Ruth finds out from Naomi that Boaz is a relative of Elimelech. So that means that they are family, according to the whole family tree and bloodlines and all that. Since she married one of Elimelech's sons, that means that Boaz he's in the family tree out there. He might be a few branches up, but
the plot thickens.
Nice. Exactly. What that means and why that's important is that family members could redeem property. So when Elimelech and Naomi had left for Moab, they would have had to have sold, mortgaged, etc., their property. So that's no longer theirs. And they hadn't come back for it, so it probably hadn't been reclaimed or anything like that. Obviously, they can't pay to reclaim this field. So it falls to a family member to redeem this land and also, by extension, to redeem Naomi and Ruth. So it's a very common practice that we see. It's another way that we see in the Old Testament, especially people being provided for when they need it. So Naomi begins to kind of hatch this plan and figure out how to use this system to her advantage, not in a bad way, but seeing kind of the bigger picture and all this, seeing the opportunities. So she gives Ruth some very specific instructions in regards to Boaz being the redeemer. So Ruth finds Boaz one night after all the work is done and they're out in the field. And this also shows that Boaz is someone who doesn't just like own a field and expect people to do the work. He'll get down there with him. He's in the trenches with his people. So she ends up making an appeal to him as a redeemer and kind of bringing the situation to his attention a little, I think. It doesn't say super explicitly whether or not he knew about all this, but she begs essentially for his kindness, and she begs for protection and comfort from him. That is an incredibly humbling thing for someone like her to do, to basically say, I need you to extend the hem of your garment, which has some language that's very similar to the Psalms that we see and all that about like being under, like the wings of Christ, like as a shelter and all this, or of under God's wing and all this. So being like under his protection. So she is humbling herself to be under someone else's protection and headship and all this. And this is all for Naomi too, not just for her, but this is for Naomi. So Boaz responds, and he says yes. And he's noticed, excuse me, he noticed that she's, been out and about, but he also knows that there's someone else who has a more direct claim. That's the whole thing with this whole redeemer of land and all this is there's whoever's the most direct family member is the one who has the right to redeem it, to essentially buy it and incorporate it into their own property. So the whole practice of the Redeemer is another great foreshadowing and example of like what we see in Christ, of us having nothing and having to humble ourselves and go to him and say, I have to put myself under you because you're the only one who can give me anything, who can redeem me from what I have, which is nothing or less than nothing. So Boaz knows the system, and he goes and he finds this person who has the actual claim. He finds the guy who is next in line to pay for this property to redeem it. And he grabs elders also so that there's witness that's happening. And what he does is he lets the guy know, hey, this field was Elimelech's. It can be redeemed. You are next in line. Would you like to do that? By all accounts, it probably is a pretty nice field. It's a field in general. We know they're not having a famine anymore. Yeah. So I'm sure any real estate's great. So the guy sounds very interested, and Boaz says, oh, by the way, with the field comes Ruth. So a little bit of a wrinkle there.
So, hey, I want the land. And then he's like, oh, by the way, if you take the land, you get the girl.
Exactly. You get this widow. So...
And he wasn't good with that.
He wasn't a fan of that because one of the other traditions and customs was that close family members, usually it was direct family, brother to brother. If a brother died, another brother would take his wife as his own wife, the brother's wife as his wife, and then give her a child so that the other brother would have a way of having his bloodline continued. So essentially he would father a child with his brother's wife, and then that child wouldn't be his. It would be his dead brother's. So that way that child...
super weird in American culture. You realize that, right? Like our viewers are like, Chris, like that sounds a little crazy.
But back in this time...
But culturally, at the time, that was,
It was all about inheritance and bloodlines and all that. So thankfully this doesn't happen today. So... Anyways, this next in line would be taking Ruth as his wife. Well, I think the assumption is he already has a wife. He already has essentially his own inheritance that he's kind of trying to add to with this field. He doesn't want to have to have another wife and give someone else a child who would then inherit this field. Yeah. So he backs out. He says, no, thank you. I waive my right to redeem. So then Boaz steps up and says, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be the one to pay the price for this field, to bring it out of debt, and I'm also going to marry Ruth and give a child. And essentially, he's putting his own bloodline, because he's not married, he doesn't have any other kids. Yeah. He's saying, I care so little about my own name that I'm going to continue the name of this son of Elimelech. There's kind of some irony to that, because the guy who was worried about his own inheritance or the inheritance he would leave in his own bloodline, he doesn't get a name in the story. And we know who Boaz is.
Yeah, he was just the other guy.
Yeah, he was just the other guy. He was Mr. So-and-so who ended up not going with it. So Boaz redeems the property, marries Ruth. Inside of everybody, he makes that claim. So he restores this family. He restores Naomi and Ruth. He brings them up out of debt, and he's providing for them. And he redeems the land, and he gives her a child. And the fun thing about that is that child's name was Obed. And Obed is the father of Jesse, and Jesse is the father of David.
King David.
King David. So this is a really fun way of how God uses messed up families. He uses jacked up circumstances. He uses trials and tribulations for his good, for his own plans. So Ruth, a foreigner, is directly incorporated into the line of Christ.
So really, just kind of wrap my head around it. And if you're watching it and you're like, this has been a lot of information, just to recap the story, what started as a famine, which was the only reason, a famine, of all things, which was great suffering for a lot of people, was the only reason that this Jewish family even met Ruth.
Yeah.
And then the death of 3 men, the husband and then the 2 sons, who one of them being Ruth's husband, was the only reason that Ruth ended up back in the homeland where they started, right? So all of these things that you look at and you're like, that's a terrible tragedy. Mm-hmm. It's a terrible tragedy. And then all of a sudden now this widow who's experienced all of these things happening, she meets this guy Boaz, a man of great character, who loves her and cares for her, buys and rescues her and her whole family, and then she ends up being like the great something grandma
a lot of great
Jesus,
a pretty great grandmother
of Jesus, though.
Yeah,
like that's incredible.
Yeah, and it's not that surprising when you see like the character of Boaz and you see the character of Ruth and how much that foreshadows it. And another funny little thing is that Boaz's mother is Rahab. If you recognize that name, that's back from our series in Joshua. Rahab was the one in Jericho who helped the 2 Israelite spies out and is not only saved from destruction, we see again is put into the direct family line of Jesus. So we have these 2 foreign women, these 2 foreigners who are following God's law, essentially, who have taken on his commands and are walking with him and obeying him, and they get to become part of this whole story. So it's overall, there's so many great like Jesus themes throughout this. I think the big thoughts of, we see the theme of being generous when you have a lot, and we see that as both mercy and grace. We see how Boaz shows mercy by giving food to Ruth. And then he shows grace by giving her even more on top of that and by redeeming her and bringing her out of. So he doesn't just redeem the field, he marries her and gives her a new bloodline and all this stuff. So there's just a lot of really cool just themes that we see in this.
So many cool themes. And I think just, to wrap this whole thing up, I mean, one of the, I'm thinking about this from the standpoint of students who are now, maybe they're in a season where they're walking into something unknown. Mm-hmm. And I mean, just like Naomi had no idea what to do when this whole famine struck and when her husband died and her kids died. And Ruth was like walking her whole life that way, right? Like, and honestly, like you can feel trapped. I mean, she was in poverty probably. And, and in this season of unknown, of being unknown, like, one of the things that just keeps coming back is, man, like Boaz was there to lovingly rescue her. And honestly, like if you're watching this, like guys, that's what Jesus does for us, right? Jesus is our Boaz, right? Like, I mean, as you sum that story up, you kept talking about the character of Boaz and how he looked out for her and gave her more and more than she should have ever had. Jesus is our Boaz.
Yeah.
And man, that's absolutely incredible. So if you're in the unknown, man, look to Jesus to be the provider for you. And man, like you said, if you have a lot, if you're in a season where you have a lot, man, be
a Boaz.
Be a Boaz.
Yeah.
And if you're stuck in the unknown, just to say like,
be a Ruth.
Be a Ruth.
Be in it. Be in the trenches with people. Like if you're in a bad season, and this is kind of timely to where we are now, just with everything going on. If you're not doing well, other people probably aren't either. So how can you be a blessing? How can you be serving, being on the exact same ground as them, and how can you really be showing Christ's love in that?
Yeah, that's great. That's great. We are going to cut to connection groups, and what we want you to talk about is we want you to talk about that. Man, where are you in this story? Right, like where do you see yourself? Do you feel like Ruth? Do you feel like Naomi? Do you feel like Boaz? And how can you learn from this thing? And so.